As has always been the case, we'd all like to have our say and put our 2 cents in for everything. Most of the time before we even try to be quiet and do any listening. That's why I won't be speaking my mind too much on here, except when necessary, because I'm trying to focus my will on learning and listening and training my mind. But I do want to put some things in perspective. Most people on the internet, and YouTube especially, seem to be largely incapable of even the most basic research. And I continually get the impression the majority of the common folk who are so plugged in to this relatively new technological model can only but seem to rely on being spoon-fed just about everything. And then being in denial about anything they can't get on demand and comprehend in a meme or a 2-minute flashy Pavlovian advertisement. While it's true some of the most profound truths are the most common sense fundamentals of everyday existence, everyone knows it's the process of refining your ability to see the obvious that's the hardest part. So many people today are so cerebrally lobotomized on some of the most basic issues, which if they could but look at any number of thousands of books from the last few centuries, they'll see the majority of them have already been worked out, gotten around, and screamed at the top of rooftops by so many martyrs and so-called lunatics, or now the preferred term conspiracy theorists, that now we have so many saints and scapegoats we don't even know where to start. You know, you'd think of people that so fucking loved science as much as they claim to, you'd expect they'd be able to do something so basic as reading, which isn't even all that scientific at first, but completely necessary if you're going to have any idea of what's known, unknown, and the many different paths others have trekked to probably even allow for your existence in the first place. How many scientists do you know have or have read The Origin of Species? Or probably less, how many more know about the long history of evolutionary biology and its many branches, not all of which lean in the same direction? The media would like to have you worry more about the same old witches, the mystics, who aren't mired in the mirror of matter and trapped in their head with paradoxes that can easily be hurdled with mental calm and training, and transcendence of duality of illusion of subject and object, and reabsorption or resynthesis of the inner with the outer, the whole alchemical process which both science and religion both owe their foundations to, the true universal communion. An entire generation is being conned into another lie. Having been disillusioned with religion for failing to do its original intended purpose of awakening the individual and providing each other with stability among the culture, now they've been corrupted and reversed to be the very beast of which they fear. Science, too, has been showing all the same signs of turning into another cult, as it is gaining members who can't seem to show any sign of value or progress quicker than it itself is progressing. The idea is to get the gullible so deluded that they'll accept anything that conforms to the idea they want to confide in at the time, and to engineer the situations over time to get them to react vehemently when such obvious illusions are threatened. This is what has been done to most of those so-called religious people, especially in the United States. So much so they've even discredited the word religion itself and the idea of anything spiritual. And most so-called Christians, with the exception of Jesus if he existed, and a few mystics here and there, have always been far from what is truly spiritual, as clear from history and much of their writings. If but you could read them! However, much higher-minded insight, one could almost say genius, has shown through some of that dark book of writings called the Bible. On the other hand, with science, the idea is to get people so lazy, hopeful, and passive that they too will blindly support and follow anything their masters of many masks present to them. Often again in shiny, flashy, clean, and modern-looking distractions and entertainments, toys for the children. If it appears that I'm for or against religion or science, then let me clear some things up. I find a lot of problems in both, but I think both are valuable. And I don't think they're nearly as exclusive as a lot of people would like to believe. The wickedest man of the internet, Aleister Crowley, was the one who drummed up the term scientific Illuminism back in 1907 when he was forming the AA or Silver Star with George Cecil Jones. When the Equinox was published in 1909, he called it the Review of Scientific Illuminism and started putting out all his major writings through it to the public. He toyed with both the fundamentalists as well as the establishment wherever he went, but always in a manner that was both serious and sarcastic, and having been called the Beast while growing up by his mother, he ended up taking the title and running with it, setting out to prove with his life what he had known in his heart, that the fundamental premises of religion, such as the idea of what's been termed the soul, and its operation apart from ordinary physiological or brain function, could be proven with the scientific method, at least for the observer, that is, the mage who applies the methods, harking to the quantum observer effect. Crowley's shown that the only difference between the magician and the scientist is that one merely considers at least 3 more worlds of reality, and a great many more sets of factors when working. The magician knows especially that the time and position of the Earth in relation to other cosmic bodies does indeed affect the actions and results. Only a lunatic would be foolish as to think otherwise. Just look at the findings of science in the last century. And the magician also knows that his mental faculties and contents of his knowledge and the internal drives and desires not only also affect everything, and the scientist would admit this too if he were wise, but the magician is benefited with a repertoire of tried and true methods of manipulating these, more or less. And this leads to the great quandary of will, destiny, and fate, both which mystic and scientists and magus struggle to understand. The magus does not redirect the natural forces against their course. He very naturally arranges the course to go as willed. If you do not will, you are subject to destiny, and what will happen according to that set of circumstances will come to pass as expected. But as soon as will is applied, the fate of the situation changes, and the level of this depends on the awareness of the circumstances involved, and the will to act as it will. The materialist scientist says in his mind, all is empty, there is no point. But the spiritful magician says in his heart, all is all, there is no one point. If life is just a chance occurrence arising from a series of combinations of right elements for the creation of a catalyst that results in the development of self-producing cellular life, is it not because there is an inner principle within driving that organism towards some other set of combined actions in order to secure its necessary conditions needed to further carry out in an infinitude of other catalysts on and on until the circle of life falls back on itself, as always is, has been, and will be? Is not this a miracle of which only it speaks for itself? Why, then, would anyone need anything more than but a reminder of what the goal of the path is? For if you were carried the whole way, then what would you gain? The root of the word science comes from the older scientia, meaning to know or understand. In the mystical sense, this means to become one with it or absorb it. Any experience being a direct connection between subject and object is itself in one ordeal. Religion comes from religare, to go through again, signifying the commonality of the path for all who tread. Though it is always similar, each is unique, and there is as many paths to God, or the soul, or truth, or reality, as there are initiates to take the path. Those who say, only this way, or only that way, are usually just signs along the way of which way not to take. But someone has to go them to know that too, and perhaps then it sufficed for them. A true scientist would go down as many paths as possible, without fear of what he may come across, and with the intention of not trying to stay too long in any one, because there's always going to be more. The old symbol of the skull and crossbones, which signified poison and danger, or sometimes even hidden treasure, can be thought of in relation to both science and religion. Think of alcohol, which both sterilizes and cleans, but can also loosen your spirit and provide a good time. And think of the dangers of technology and biology, but think of the potentials. The symbol of the skull and the crossbones relates to the O and the X, or the X and the O, which has been called the mark of the beast, but symbolizes the lux and nox, or nox and lux, the subject and object, uniting to create manifest reality. And the skull and bones is the ancient symbol of occult knowledge, which is the hidden light of magic and the mystery of death. And some people are so pitifully scared of this knowledge and the ordeal that they would rather condemn themselves to a whole nother eon of being mired in the mirror of their discontent, rather than to go within or beyond. Even with metal skulls and bones and motherboard brains and silicone skin, some people will just never be saved from themselves, and in that way they've already been condemned to hell, even if they think they don't believe in it, by not believing in themselves. The first step always is to ask the great question, who am I?